What you gonna do? What you gonna do? What you gonna do?
close till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go. Finding life along the way, melodies we haven't played. No, I don't want no rest. Echoing around these walls, fighting to create a song. I don't wanna miss a beat. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go. And we'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands. And we'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go.
Boxes, I cannot fit in the boxes. Stop it, quitting was never an option. Exhausted, this passion is never exhausted. And you cannot stop it, nah, you cannot stop it.
I had to switch up the flow, show you the way that it go. God is good, but his life is hard. But it gets better when you grind smart. I'm just really trying to leave a mark. We tired of being who they say we are. That's the baton, we gon' take it far.
I was the real, we don't fake it all.
Tired of 9 to 5, just making enough to survive. Only living on the weekends. You really thinking that's why I'm alive? Busting out the scenes, time to live my dreams.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Around the Halo. I am Matt McClure with Little Flower Media. Thank you for joining us once again, everybody. It's great to see everybody in chat and obviously all of our friends. We have a almost completely new crew here tonight, which is super exciting to go around the halo real quick. I'll give everybody the chance to introduce themselves a little bit, but just to go real fast, over here we have our very own Little Flower Media's bearded Matthew Marcolini up here on the upper left-hand corner. We have Bobby Angel from Word on Fire. Thank you so much. Bobby Angel's handle Instagram, by the way, not Twitter, in case anybody is looking to follow. Joel Stepanek, Chasing Humility, back again, and currently our most stable member of the group, who's just willing to come week in, week out.
In all aspects, the most stable
absolutely
person of every grouping.
Across the board.
And
Darnell from St. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, brother. Absolutely. It's good to see you again. We were lucky enough to be at St. Thomas to film some stuff, and Darnell is incredible in a variety of ways, from podcast to film editing. So we certainly appreciate his take with us tonight. So that's enough of me introducing you guys. Let's take a quick 30 seconds for you to introduce yourselves. You can talk about anything you want, perhaps even tease what you might discuss later if you were to win the show with 30 seconds to yourself, if you would like to. So we'll go in the same order. Marcolini, go for it.
Welcome to the stream, everybody. So glad to be here. I am just so glad to be here with Mr. Joel Stepanek. I've heard so much about him from John, I swear, every day. No, I'm kidding. He's not only best friend, but also man crush. But I'm Bearded Marco, Matt Marcolini, one of the co-founders of Little Flower Media. Work with John here, and just excited to be here. Thanks.
Sweet. Bobby, take it away.
I'm Bobby Angel. I'm a husband, father, writer. I lift heavy things, and then I put them down. And I'm a fellow at the Word on Fire Institute, Bishop Barron's Media Apostolate, and excited to be part of this project and other video game initiatives we've got that we're working on. Sweet.
Awesome. Go for it, Joel.
I once did Whole 30 in 5 days and used the other 25 days to brag about it on social media.
Amazing. Darnell, awesome. Hit it out of the park. Go ahead, Darnell.
Hey, I'm Darnell Miller. Yes, the middle name is in Spanish, and I'm a producer at Max Studios, and I'm super excited to be here.
Thanks so much, you guys. So as you know, the points don't matter at all because I'm the one who's giving them out, and we can tell right away off the bat that some intros were better than others. And I don't want anyone to take it personally. It's just that I like you more if you've got more points. So let's go ahead and fire it up.
Oh, it's
obviously.
Personal.
Yeah, now it's getting real.
That's personal. I see the numbers.
If they matter, Joel would be winning right now, says chat. Yep, a crowd favorite because of his stability. So we're going to go ahead. As you know, everybody, we have a variety of topics that we're going to discuss, and we're going to touch a little bit on everything from religion to politics to sport to just anything within the zeitgeist, as it were. So let's fire it up with our first topic right away. Super Bowl halftime show. This actually was probably one of the only parts of the Super Bowl that I actually paid attention to, just because it felt like being back in high school for me personally. And so as excited as I was to be included as a borderline boomer in that particular regard, I thought it was interesting that there was a set of mandates given to the artists about what they could and couldn't do, and then fully expected all of those artists to then break those rules. So what do you think, Marco? Is it reasonable for that group of people to just kind of do whatever they want once they're hired?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that's why you're hiring him, for one, right? Because we love Eminem. We all loved Eminem's rebellion and angst as we listened to Lose Yourself in 2002 when it came out, right? And you expect 50 Cent to do what he did and Dre to do what he did. But if you're a patron, though, of the arts, I mean, you have every right to expect to put some guardrails down and to have input on that art. Obviously, you're not going to be able to take control of that, but you should also expect to get a lot of pushback from the artist.
Yeah, I was just impressed that actually they were able to fit that many egos on that stage together, which wouldn't have happened 15 years ago. So I don't know. What do you think, Bobby? Is it reasonable to to be disappointed that there wasn't a little bit more, little bit more headbutting between a group of people that you would usually expect that to diss each other?
Well, I think it was definitely the hip hop Avengers in a way of the 90s. And it started and it ended with Dr. Dre, who has done a lot for hip hop and rap over the years and even signed on some of those artists on the stage. So I actually saw kind of the inverse of it's hard for that many personalities to share a stage well, to give up time to other people. But I thought it was a apt honoring of, Dr. Dre and what he's been through, even in his health, that he was up there. Interesting too that American culture is pop culture. Like, what unites us? Like, look at the Super Bowl halftime show to get a glimpse of what does America value.
Yeah, absolutely. It is kind of fascinating to see the trends as it goes back and forth. Now, Joel earlier mentioned how much his favorite halftime show was Prince when he performed. Joel, why is that?
Because Prince was a legendary performer. Okay, the guy was multi-talented and incredible. Show. I think they missed some opportunities. To that point, you're in California. You have the technology. Why was there no Tupac hologram? Why was there no Eazy-E hologram? These are gimmies. These are simple things for a halftime show.
That's a layup.
That could be incredible. When California Love hit, I thought for sure we were going to get Tupac. I thought for sure we could have gone back to some of the NWA classics and brought back Eazy-E via hologram. Now, I know there's like all kinds of estate issues and things like that. But to your point, can you control the artists? No, but you can control the holograms. And maybe that's something they might have looked at. Quite frankly, I'm about a conspiracy theory here, though. I think the NFL wants these people to rebel. They want Eminem to take the knee. They want to throw the artist out there. They don't care because it gives them publicity. It gives them press. They love it. I thought it was a great halftime show, but I'm also, a kid of the 2000s, and that's who they're appealing to. And anybody younger than us was like, who are these people? And why is Snoop Dogg only 1 year older than Eminem?
That is actually pretty incredible when you think about it. Well, Darnell, I know you've got an album that's getting ready to drop. As a fellow artist, do you identify with these guys in that way?
No, I mean, I love all of them. And I do think they did think of the younger generation, giving them Kendrick Lamar, who is going to be an OG in a handful of years. So I think that's fantastic that they did have that. But I also agree. I'm also of that same generation of Eminem and Snoop Dogg were what I listened to growing up, and I really appreciate them having them there. And I also agree with you, Joel. Like, I think, like, pending a fiasco like Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake, they're looking for that edge. They're looking for those views, and they're looking for a way to kind of like titillate people, right? To get them interested in what's going on, especially for those people who aren't really interested in the football. They need to bring them in somehow, and this is the halftime show is the easy way in.
Yeah, and I also agree with Rocky from chat. A giant Tupac drone image is a missed opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally agree with you on that one, Rocky. All right, moving right along. The Metaverse, why we should care. I actually thought about this for a long time, and I'm very aware of the Metaverse and what it is that they're trying to go for. And I kind of can't figure out a reason that I should care because my generation has already taken over and pushed the envelope of these types of things. For example, I'm doing a live stream with 4 other guys in which we talk about the world through a Catholic lens. So that's pretty progressive in my world of the universe. Plus, whether I'm wearing goggles or not, I'm totally focused on whatever game I'm playing. It's not like it makes a difference whether I'm wearing synth gloves. What do you think, Bobby? This is clearly something that's right up your alley with the topics you guys have been talking about lately.
Are you saying you're playing a video game right now?
Yeah, no, I'm for sure. Actually, my version of talking to you guys is a video game, and I have much more control than anyone should be comfortable with.
We are incarnational, and so as much as we love this technology and we trying to use it for good, I think it's just this further, like, we're trying to get out of our bodies, and some people prefer to live in that, and I think some of us are aware, like, this is kind of crazy. But there's plenty of people signing up ready to do it. And I think it's just another space we're going to have to figure out how to bring the gospel into. It's all very odd and very weird. And I'm an old man at heart who just wants my controller and leave me alone. But it's one of these things we have to pay attention to, even though I don't want to.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I get that. And my mother would say that I already have been having plenty of out-of-body experiences because she could not get my attention while I was in the middle of any particular game of Contra 3. It just was impossible. That was 22 minutes that I was just going to beat that game 100%. And yet someone in the chat is totally identifying with that right now, and they're going like, that was the greatest Super Nintendo game ever. But what do you think, Joel? Is this like something that we should be concerned about, or is it an opportunity for future success?
Look, I'm going to say this multiple times on this show tonight. I'm tired of living in a science fiction apocalypse movie. I'm tired of it. Like this sucks at this point. The metaverse, we've gone down this road before, which is what I just don't understand. We went down this road with the Terminator franchise, all of the movies, which got progressively worse. We went down this with the Matrix franchise, which all of those movies got progressively worse. And now we have the metaverse, which seems like kind of a cutesy fun idea, but like those movies, it's going to get progressively worse. Even Ready Player One, like this is the plot line of that book, of that movie. And yet we've done this and everybody's like, I don't think it's going to turn out that way though. I think it'll be fine. Right? Don't you think this will be fine? And then we've lost our humanity, and you've got a group of people living in an agrarian society who don't want to be a part of the grid. But this is where things are going. We are going towards the metaverse. Eventually, in 20 years, it's going to be normal for you to not go to a job, but to plug in, to put on the sensory gloves, and to have a meeting. This type of thing will be us all sitting in a coffee shop or a bar in the metaverse, having these kinds of conversations as if we're actually there. And there will be a rogue group of people who refuse to live this way, and they will live in the world like Matthew McConaughey encouraged us to do via that awesome Salesforce commercial during the Super Bowl. But this is the way we're going. The only way we're getting out of it is if we're in a simulation already, at which point the metaverse is just Inception.
Yeah, that's very possible. And I do think that there's probably some kind of element involved that in every generation, between when you're born and when your life ends, that you have slipped into your own personal dystopian future because it's just so different at this point from what you were originally raised with. Like, for example, Darnell is so young that he probably started, on an MP3 player. And I don't even know if like my kids could identify that at this point. They're like, why is there buffering that annoys me? So totally different thing. What do you think, Darnell?
I'm not as young as you think I am. I'm 33, man. So I did have a cassette player growing up and all that. But
you're my hero.
I want to disagree with Joel just a little bit on that. I think there is potential for good in the metaverse, and I do think there's a lot of potential for bad, and a lot of potential to get ourselves into like situations where we are ignoring the real world, ignoring what we're called to, right? But I think of this past Friday, I went with my wife to an AR experience called The Infinite, where it lets you walk on the space station. We have the VR goggles walking around in space, right? You can kind of see other people. And that experience was something that's the closest I'm ever going to get to going into space, I'm pretty sure, in my lifetime. And I think when you have experiences like that, I think those could be value add experiences to your life. As opposed to like let's just have coffee in a virtual coffee shop with each other. Those big experiences that move us beyond ourselves, move us beyond our day-to-day, have an impact on us, and can change how we see ourselves holistically. And I think that is where the value is. And we need people like us, people who see that and want to create that.
Yeah.
I would take a lesson from Web 2.0 though. There's lots of social media, but instead what we do is we argue with each other and foster distrust and fake news.
That is because
I think Web 3's got a great potential. But yeah, could we or will we?
Yeah, and that's the rub, man. That's the rub.
Yeah, that is because perhaps the state of the resting human brain at this point is to judge, and that is why we are called to try to refuse that thought process as often as possible and not go down that path on a regular basis. Well, Marco, I know that you and I share this in common, even though I'm the boomer and you're the youngin', but you also have Terminator 2 on Laserdisc, which is pretty incredible. And what makes Terminator 2 the best of the dystopian futures?
Because it's true.
Yeah.
Next question. Toss Mike walks away.
Because it's canon.
Because it's canon, exactly. No, I mean, I think with this whole situation, I think we're looking at, the internet is not going to be what it is now in 10 years, right? We won't have websites so what we do now. We won't have any of the stuff that we're looking at and the way we utilize it now, right? We're at a serious pivotal moment. Computers are still advancing at every 2 years, doubling in power and decreasing in size by 1.5, right? Like, it's going to get bigger, better, faster, and people are going to be taken in by it, right? What we're doing, like right here on this, what we're doing streaming, what Bobby's doing with God and Gaming. I said that right, Bobby? And great show. Check it out on Word on Fire Institute's YouTube. they're rescue missions, right? We're not going to drive down. We're not going to drive down the divorce rate in Jacksonville, Florida, by having a really, really great stream, right? However, we can go in there, throw a fireman carry a dude and his wife on our back, and bring him back to the church, right? Or bring good truth and beauty into their life, right? If beauty is transcendental or not, if we can get to them, right? I mean, and we're not going to have a widespread effect in the way other ministries and things like Word on Fire are doing, or what Joel's doing with Life Team, right? Or University of St. Thomas is doing in these communities in real places. However, we have to be there, unequivocally, without a doubt. If we are not there, we are failing, because, like Joel said, terrible stuff is going to be on there. Terrible, awful stuff happens on the internet every day, right? And that's one of the things that we have to be there to. We have to help shape it, right? We need to go work at Meta, right, and be on the policy teams, right? I have good friends that are on that work at Meta, formerly Facebook, right, that are on the policy teams, that are shaping these things, and that's hugely important. So that's my take.
Yeah, I strongly agree. I knew there was a reason that we were business partners, and it's nice to hear it just be solidified in a concise way in a discussion about the metaverse. Next week, a full 2 hours on the metaverse, apparently. Go ahead, Joel.
One thing I think I'll drop this some bonus content.
Yeah, go for
it. In all of this, as we're talking, I think the ethics of it, that's where it becomes challenging, is at what level do you actually become distorted by the thing? At what point is it like, even though that's good and has redeeming value, and I think that's the ethical question, like Meta and people, that's why they have policy boards, right? This is like new uncharted territory, and it's apples to oranges. But I read a story years ago about a guy who was embedded with gangs. He was an undercover agent, and so he was in this world with the idea of like taking down criminals, solving cases, but they wound up having to pull this guy out because he had spent too much time there and was having trouble distinguishing himself as a federal agent from a gang member. And I think that's the thing. Like, if you think about the metaverse as a stew, you can throw some potatoes in there. We can be the potatoes or the carrots, or you can be the beef, whatever you'd like. Bobby, you can be the beef. But eventually, the longer you keep those things in it, they break down and they take on the character of the thing that they're in, and they lose their character. To which I would say, once something loses its character, or maybe salt loses its saltiness, with what can we season it?
But isn't that a bit of a red herring, though, Joel? Because at the same time, like, that's true for every situation. You see that with undercover.
It is 100%
life, right? So you have
I'm saying, are these things engineered in such a way that they actually do more harm than good, that they're more detrimental to us cognitively than we realize, and as a result, our very participation in those things becomes challenging. So, like, I'll give you an example. At Life Team, where I work, we'd have ethical conversations all the time about social media, knowing what it does to a teenager's mind and the negative impact it can have on them. And like, okay, how do we leverage this and keep it in check, when at the same time we know that this could actually be a dangerous spot for a teenager? And I think it's the balance. So I would say, at what point do we know, that's maybe too far, Because I agree with you. We got to go places, but
to
at
quote
what point
the
is it
prophet,
too much?
To quote the prophet Jeff Goldblum, your scientists were so preoccupied whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think whether or not they should.
Show's over.
All right, so
that's why you stay on the live stream, folks.
Wrapping up on the metaverse, even bonus points for Bobby on that one. All right, moving along. We don't talk about Bruno, but should we? So this is from Encanto, I think, the Disney film that's floating around at the moment. And I know that my kids have seen it. I'm sure I've seen the whole thing in 4 to 7 minute increments by just walking through my own living room occasionally, as it seems to be on repeat at this point. But there is a song in which they, declare that we don't talk about Bruno, and then they go on to then tell you everything about Bruno, or at least each character's version of what that is. And it really seemed to me to hit me hard from a kind of the importance that people place on perhaps having a scapegoat in their own lives and how dangerous it can be to, just like put that onto another person. In this case, it's a family talking about one individual, and it seems like they're all kind of dealing with their own personal issues. But what do you think, Joel? Do you have a favorite scapegoat, and why is it John Blevins?
I never scapegoat John Blevins.
I know. It's too bad, actually.
And in full disclosure, I don't think I'm going to get any points on this question at all, because despite having 2 young children, I have never seen Encanto. I've not seen it. I've not heard a song from it. I wouldn't be able to tell you about a song from it. And maybe in that regard, in talking to other parents, I'm lucky that I haven't had these earworms, because they love it. I mean, they don't think it's a bad movie. They love the music, but they do say that these songs are addictive. And so maybe for a reason, I've been spared from that. As far as scapegoats go, though, I think scapegoats give us an opportunity to distract ourselves from our own personal things. So I'll go deep in the philosophy on this one, since I haven't seen this movie, but I think a scapegoat allows us to exit ourselves and say, see, I'm not that bad. It's the same reason why we love to point people out in our society or culture beyond accountability to the point of running them out of town, because it allows me to say, see, look at that person. They're terrible and I'm not. And as long as I'm focusing on their sins, I don't have to focus on my own.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm starting to get nervous now as we have this discussion, because every night before bed, my 4-year-old looks at me and says, "Good night, Bruno." And I don't know enough about the character but I'm starting to get concerned. Darnell, does your wife ever look at you and say, "Good night, Bruno"?
No, she never says goodnight, Bruno.
Okay.
But I will say I have seen Encanto, and it is a fantastic film, and sneaky film to talk about, generational trauma. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend it for that, because it did something that I hadn't seen a lot of other movies do. But I do like your dive into Bruno, and I see it as like what are the things in our lives we don't want to talk about? What are the things in our lives we're afraid to tackle head on? What are the things in our church that we're afraid to talk about? And so I think the song's relatable because everybody has something that they're afraid to touch. They have somebody in their family who has wronged somebody or has done something, and they're just like, that's the person we don't want to deal with. But I think in the church, we are called to deal with the Brunos, to talk about the Brunos and to bring them back into the fold. So that's why I think this song is important. It's a super catchy song. Wrong. His music is so good. Listen to it.
Sweet. And just a reminder to the chat, as awesome as all of you are, we did just kind of disable the alerts for this particular stream just because we're kind of in the middle of recording a show. But I just want to let everybody know that we do appreciate you guys gifting subs and going through that whole process, and everybody, the chat is bumping with conversation, and that's awesome. But just as a quick reminder, we're not shouting it out at the moment, but just know that we love you. Marco, I had a question in my head and I kind of lost it, having to do with, okay. So because I made that joke about John being the scapegoat, for Joel, even though I don't think that that's the case, do you feel like in our little community, it does kind of turn into, you and me recognizing that John deserves to be scapegoated because he's such a strong and enticing personality?
No, next question.
Okay, great. You're afraid for your job. I understand how it goes.
I am afraid for my job. No. Well, I mean, I think talking about the scapegoat, and I actually read the Wikipedia page real quick. That's how I passed college. And I'm actually going to watch the movie now after reading that, because it actually seems really interesting, and Darnell's take on it and Joel's take. I think it's something that going out into the fold, going into those crevices, right, like St. Francis did, going and dealing with the radically impoverished, be it radically impoverished of love or in whatever way, we just need, right? And we just have to be pure self-gift. But we're talking about scapegoats, right? I mean, an excuse in moral theology makes a bad action more understandable. Makes a bad action good, right? And I think we all try to look to these scapegoats in our own lives and our families and try to justify either things we did wrong, right? Or make excuses. Now, the whole thing that make excuses for the things that may have been bad, but more understandable. And I think the idea of, because I still just remember my teacher, Mrs. Lake, first grade, St. Andrew's Catholic School, yelling, "No excuses, Mr. Marcolini," right? And I always had this thing, I have hatred of excuses. And then I go study theology in college, and they're like, oh, wait, but, they can actually be really helpful in discussing intent, and discussing empathy. So. scapegoats maybe sometimes can be helpful.
Yeah, and I did listen to this song in particular a few times and watch it once with my girls, and I think that perhaps, even though that was my takeaway of the scapegoat, that there was, it seemed like another way to interpret it was how difficult it is to speak truth, right? Because this character basically told all these other members of his family, like, his interpretation of, what he saw their future to be. And some of them, thought that it should have been, they took it to, I'm going to be incredibly successful and it doesn't matter what I do. And some of them, they didn't feel that it played out the way that he had originally described it, even though the error was really on their side. Bobby, do you think there's some danger to that as well?
Yeah, and I love Darnell's assessment too of we all have a family who may be the black sheep, who may be someone who we don't even know why, or maybe they've accepted that identity, but it's on us to reach out to them. Again, what has been maybe said in truth, as difficult as it is, has led to them being ousted. It's a film that I'm from Florida, and I have friends from all over the world, growing up there. Friends from Colombia who are very proud of this film. Joel, Be Not Afraid. It's a really good film. We're slow to it, and since our kids watched it the first time, and I watch every film with my arms crossed. I'm like, I'm not gonna like it. And then Lin-Manuel Miranda can write a hook like no one else, and it gets stuck in your head. Animation is beautiful. Like what they've done, like with hair and like water animation, like when she's sitting by the river near the end of the film, it's just like, it looks like real water, like the graphics on these films. And yeah, an intergenerational trauma and pain and perfectionism, and it's very psychologically insightful. It pushes Inside Out. I love Inside Out. Inside Out as a dad with girls.
Really?
That movie like destroys me. And I'm seeing the memes around where it's like Inside Out is being shoved aside by Encanto.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment as well. But it is nice to be able to have, because I don't remember that many animated films from when I was growing up that hit the same way whether it could entertain an adult or a child, right? And I don't think it happened that often. And so now when you start to see like the progression of these films, like as the generations, move through, it absolutely is, my kids are taking something from it and I'm taking something from it and I'm coming back and looking at them 5 years later and then realizing something else. It's really kind of an incredible feat, I think of.
And random trivia is that the particular song we don't talk about, Bruno, hit number 2 on the Billboard 100.
Did it really?
As of like a week or two ago.
That's amazing.
Which is, you think would be like, Let It Go from Frozen did that. Aladdin's A Whole New World in 1993 was the last time a Disney song got that high.
Wow.
Also a fantastic song.
Also a great flick. All right.
Back in my head for the rest of the night.
Yeah, exactly. We'll try to get something else in there. All right, moving right along. Okay, so an Indian court bans religious clothing. So I thought this was a particularly interesting article that I read after actually John threw this one out in the chat, I believe. But it was essentially a southern province in India said that they were going to ban religious clothing until they could figure out kind of how to solve some of the internal pressures that were involved with educating their students, and that shouldn't be a barrier to anyone getting an education, whether someone needed to be wearing a certain type of headscarf or headdress or what have you in that particular culture, which I thought was interesting and obviously relatively progressive for the area in which it took place. But it is unique to kind of think about if you turn it into something that you would see in our schools as well, which I don't think we're kind of at a place where religious clothing is banned in any capacity in the United States, but just kind of playing the mind game of like, what if you got to that point where you felt like in order to level the playing field, you needed to say, I'm sorry, you can't wear that cross, or, whatever you might be, have on your clothes that represents you and your religion is something that is a hindrance to other people learning. Do you think this is kind of fine line, Darnell, when it comes to this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so the only way I think you get away with banning clothes of any type is if it's Crocs, right? Shots fired right there. But I do think, like, in this particular case, it seems like they were targeting a specific demographic group as a means to shut them out, isolate them, and so I think because of the context behind it, of them specifically targeting burqas, right? That's what it was. I think that's where the error is. It wasn't just like a ban across the board, the line of like no sandals, like a high school dress code. And I think coming from America, we take the idea of religious freedom like very, very lightly. It's something that we just expect and that we want and we know, and that's not the case across the world. So I think it's something that we should pray about. It's something that we need to be aware of and recognize the privilege that we have here currently. But I do think it's problematic when you start trying to figure out, hey, like, different religions can't do this, can't do that. Like, there's some freedom that should be afforded.
Yeah, it is kind of I always feel like it is kind of a difficult line, because while we live in a pluralistic society where you don't want to impinge on anybody's religious freedoms, there is also this element of, obviously a separation of church and state, and a lot of times schools in particular, public schools, try to, be inclusive with, and perhaps go too far the other direction and remove rights from students in which they, might be trying to express themselves, which is kind of the opposite of what they're trying to do. I don't know. It's a difficult one. Marco, have you ever experienced this personally or know anybody that has?
No, actually, I do. A gentleman who became a friend of mine was a Sikh in the army and was banned from wearing his turban, right? So a lot of people think that Muslims wear turbans. Not true. It's actually their distantly related religious cousins, the Sikhs, who are wonderful people and believe in hospitality thoroughly. So he was not allowed. He ended up winning his court case and now has a really fancy and really awesome digital camo turban with,
awesome.
With his rank insignia right in the front. It's super cool. But I mean, it was deeply troubling to him that a country that stands for religious freedom would not allow him to do that too. Would not allow him to wear something that does not affect his readiness in the force, right? Sure, if you wanted to wear something head to toe that impeded your movement as an army officer, that might not be the best. You might not be in the right job, right? Because you can ask for reasonable accommodation to a point, right? That's what reasonable accommodation is. If we're looking at this through the land of the Indian court, there's a lot of demographics that we have to take into account. There are huge divisions between the Hindu castes and the Muslim castes, right? They're dealing with the hijab and the students wearing it, and is it distracting? Parents were angry. I mean, this is a case. This is a case of religious discrimination and religious bigotry at its finest, honestly. And it happens a lot to Christians over there. It depends on where you are in the country. In the country of India, each province is different, has different makeup. It's the big dispute in the Kashmir Valley between Pakistan and India is ongoing. Pakistan was part of India, majority Muslim country that broke off. And so you see these things and you look at it and you're like, why, right? Like when we look at it from an American perspective, we have the Constitution, obviously a flawed document, right? And it's in its original writing. We've taken some great pains to change some of that. Do people ultimately have the right to wear what they believe brings them closer to God? I think so. Do I think I have the right to impinge upon that unless it causes direct harm to another individual or themselves? I don't think I do.
Yeah, that's fair. And I also think that it's, I think, like you said, reasonable accommodation. Like, there's going to be different versions of that based on what it is that you're doing. But education seems like one of those places where you could accommodate an awful lot of scenarios in order to make people generally comfortable. So it is kind of a unique circumstance. Now, Bobby's wearing a black polo, which, I tried to get him to change before the show because it goes against my internal religious beliefs that I've just made up for this particular segment. But what do you think, Bobby?
It's a complicated history of Islamic and relationships with the Hindu population there. And so, yeah, but the whole the Indian bishops over there have spoken up against the persecution that's been going on, and the fact that it's can be hostile. And to say no religious clothing, you have other parts of the world like Canada where they've passed legislation like that, where you can't work at a bank and wear a cross around your neck. So it's a slippery slope if we're targeting one religion, but it has to get applied across the board. And then you get into a spot of uniformity where it is just kind of now watered down in a secular way of unreligious, so that no one feels threatened. And so we have to be discerning and asking questions here, like what's really going on. And it's, again, as Marco said, there's a lot of facets to this particular equation. I think you have to stand with those who are oppressed here, though, again, not out of they're unwilling to, they can't do a job, they can't function, but it's out of religious discrimination. Like, well, that's not cool. But it's also looking like, to play devil's advocate, it's also like, as a school, what the school can demand, like there's a uniform. And so how far can a school go to enforce, like, the students must dress alike here? And I'm just lobbing that out to Joel to put him on the spot of the rights of a school to maybe assert that.
Yeah, that's fair. And I do want to hear what Joel has to say, but just to piggyback off your idea, I think we saw this most recently with masks, right? And having it be either made part of or removed from a uniform code, depending on what side of, the aisle an individual district was. So, it does seem like there is some control that they have over that element. What do you think, Joel?
Well, I think, first of all, the soundbite out of context for the night is Marco saying that the Constitution is a flawed document. I always think, what is the one thing someone's going to say that you could just take out of context and bring it back to bite him?
Start the YouTube edit with that.
You take that out of context, that's still in context.
Yeah, the Constitution. You threw a qualifier on it, but that's not how the internet works, and that's not how either, because you can buy a billboard with that in the metaverse. I think schools and institutions that especially are responsible for the formation of young people, and this is a worldwide thing. We've noted some important things about culture. In America, we always read our own culture into any other culture and assume that, like, oh, India, that's like the United States. It's not. Like, it's a completely different cultural experience with a completely different history that has its own baggage, its own benefits, and its own challenges. And I think sometimes we have to be careful as we're reading into that to be like, oh, like, that's terrible. Like, there's some real serious stuff that's driving all of these pieces. So I've got 3 quick thoughts. The first thought is that we've got to be more culturally aware as Americans, that we do a terrible job at that. Number 2, schools have a duty to promote the human development of a person and to protect that. And so I think when we talk about religious garb, when we say, oh, like, don't they have a responsibility to have a uniform and to bring uniformity to things? It does not take into account, and I think this is a fact, that religion is an important part of human development. I think we've sort of segregated that a lot of ways and said, well, I mean, that's like a nice add-on, but it's not. It's actually very essential to the core of who we are. We are religious beings. We create rituals. Even those who are atheists or secular humanists, I mean, you can go to California and find humanist churches where people get together for community and readings and inspiration on a Sunday morning. We are inherently religious beings. So when a school says, well, we can't have any sort of religious attire, or a government, which is also responsible, it has a responsibility to proper human development, says, well, we're going to level the playing field by saying no religion, you actually negate an important part of what humanity needs, of what we need as humans, as religious beings. And then I think just the third part is this is a cautionary tale. There is a majority in power that is enforcing these things, which is discriminatory against the Islamic population of these provinces in India. But as Christians, we have our own checkered history with things like this, where we've said that is bad, that is not good, that is anathema, and we need to eradicate it. We need to suppress it. And I think we would do well to remember these moments when we find ourselves in a place, we talk about what does Christendom look like, or things like that, just to be mindful of the ways that we continue to remember what it's like to be on this side of the coin.
Yeah. That's fair. Good points by all. I'm proud of you. Let's move on to our next topic. Oh, this was a fun one. Bobby originally said, what are we playing right now? Which I thought is, as a worthy discussion, we could perhaps extend that conversation a little bit into what you feel is perhaps a game or sport with greatest world impact or societal impact, which I thought was a fun thought exercise. John Blevins would find a way to figure out why it's Fortnite, and have that be his answer, I assume, unless he's in chat and he wants to chime in. But in thinking about this, I kind of thought about it outside the box a little bit, and even went to, like, board games that may have, shaped some stuff. I couldn't get Monopoly out of my head because I was kind of like, yeah, no, everyone else goes bankrupt for one person to be rich. That's kind of how it goes, which seems a little bit accurate in our current economic state. But I don't know. What do you think, Marco? You got a 30-second soundbite for this one?
Well, I think it depends on what we're talking about first. I think Alex in the chat is a lot. If we're looking at early stage video games, right? Tetris changed the world.
Mm-hmm.
Think about Mario Kart, right? But in reality, Fortnite, and its Unreal Engine and Chaos Engine is driving a lot of what Web3 is going to be. However, modern warfare lobbies in the early 2000s shaped my life. Getting yelled at by 40-year-old dudes saying terrible things changed me and made me who I am. I'm done.
Yeah, no, and you're a much stronger person for having gone through that, even though you probably learned some words way younger than you were supposed to.
Even though I'm still traumatized and I've been talking about it.
Yeah, no, the PTSD is evident when we play, but no, I'm glad you're working through it with us collectively as a group. What do you think, Bobby?
I think, yeah, Halo LAN parties are something that were very formational for me and deformational in college. But, I think the case could be made for Mario as just as recognizable as Mickey Mouse. But I was thinking and praying on this, and I really think Pokemon is something that came at a very pivotal time in gaming history, has stayed on to this very day. There are still Pokemon games coming out. In terms of culture, like cartoons and merchandise, and again, a Pikachu that's just as recognizable as Mickey Mouse, and integrating AR technology, like watching my friends walk into the street trying to chase a Pokemon that wasn't there. It's like Pokemon Go. Like, yeah, Pokemon Go to the ER.
Gone.
Have at it.
Yeah, that is fair. And perhaps one of the reasons that I haven't let my kids go that deep down the rabbit hole, because I'm already concerned about them walking into traffic. I don't need them trying to chase down something specific in IRL. Joel, what do you think? Is this something that's worthy of just a video game topic, or would you take it into the world of sports, as I assume you will?
The Mayans had some interesting games, but I don't know if they were world changing. So I don't know.
They changed some people's worlds.
Yeah, changed some people's worlds. I thought a lot about this question. I thought, was it chess, as a game that across cultures is a thinking game. It's an intellectual game. It stood the test of time as a highly intellectual game that we even have machines play. And I think chess is one of those things that's sort of the ultimate display of human intelligence versus artificial intelligence, and has been one of those things for a while. Like, a human sits down to play chess. Can it beat a computer that's running all of the equations and all of the scenarios and all of the next moves? I think that's a pretty cool thing. As far as shaping a world impact right now in history, I went and looked for the butterflies that flapped its wings and caused a hurricane across the world. Islands of Kesmai was a game released in 1984 by CompuServe and is regarded as one of the first massive multiplayer online games ever released. And that sets the framework for all the things we're talking about that then had their own impact on gaming. World of Warcraft, Fortnite, these other games where people get together and play in lobbies and have these huge experiences that are online. So if I were to say the most influential game, I think it's that small one from CompuServe in 1984 that flapped its wings and caused the hurricane.
Yeah,
it's floppy disk.
Flapped its floppy disk wings.
5 1/4 inch floppy disk wings.
Yeah, it's incredible. Fun fact, since you brought that up, a human hasn't beaten a computer at chess in over 7 years. So I'm going to go ahead and declare that era over. I don't think we're
still think the metaverse is a good idea.
I don't think that we're competing in that space anymore.
Can't even beat them at chess anymore.
Yeah. It was granted, that's the only thing that they're supposed to do, but nonetheless. What do you think about this one, Darnell?
So I'll admit I am not as versed in video games as y'all are. I haven't owned a system since the PlayStation 1. but I do have a retro Pi that has a Genesis emulator on it, and the game that changed my life as an 8 or 9-year-old kid that I still play regularly is Streets of Rage 2. It's an old side scroller similar to like Double Dragon, all those. Number 2 is the best version of it. I have no idea why. 1's good, 3's all right, but 2 is the one. I think it's the most nostalgic. I just have really good memories of going over to my uncle's house, who's the one who eventually gave me his Genesis back in the day, and playing for hours and hours with him and my sister. And that is my formative gaming experience. That's all I want to play. That's all I cared to play. All the new stuff is too many buttons, man. Too many buttons. I just need the 3, maybe the 6 if you have the fancy controller, and that's all I want.
Yeah, that's fair. I understand that, but I also very much enjoyed when Joel was talking about. I did think of chess originally when I was like, oh, this would have an impact, like in terms of world impact. That that seems like one of those things that would go that direction. But I would now change my answer to Streets of Rage 2. I think it's a great poll. I didn't think about it from that perspective, but I'm glad that you brought it up. Here we go. Topic number 7 of 8. Does Apple promote discrimination? The answer to this is clearly yes, and the way that I know that is when we went through this text chain, Marco immediately went, "You, who has the green bubble?" And it's me, because I'm a Samsung user, and Apple... And a boomer, and Apple going back to the days for a couple of reasons. One being that they wanted to charge you 99 cents for everything, even though apps should have been free because they were collecting all of your data even then. So they wanted $1 and all my data. Like, you got to pick one. And then when they bricked a bunch of your phones, when they had a mandatory update that no longer worked with an Apple 3. I think the iPhone 3 was what I had, the last Apple product that I owned, and so I said I was done with them as a company. But it is funny because even though I feel discriminated against in that particular way with the green bubble, there is an issue within Apple as an organization dealing with discrimination at the moment. And Marco made a great point as we were talking earlier that they just seem to be throwing out NDAs all over the place, non-disclosure agreements, to kind of try to keep things hush. But they are a massive corporation, and they're going to have some of that stuff go on. But what do you think about this one, Bobby? Does the green bubble extend to a culture within their corporate climate?
Well, do you remember when they said we don't throttle your phone batteries?
Yeah, liars.
And then that got exposed, and then that led to this, like, oh, now we're quasi-transparent about how your phone battery is doing. The covering up is always worse than, as bad as the original actions are. And so this is, from a PR standpoint, when you try to save face and you try to do what you have to do as a business, but the human element, the world we're living in right now, demands transparency. And no, there cannot be the expectation of like everyone in the organization, everyone in leadership is perfect. But when you start intentionally trying to cover up people that are blowing the whistle, like, well, now you got bigger issues here.
Yeah, that's fair. Evan in chat says it turns out when you get a bunch of companies started with a bunch of recluse nerds, they might have some pretty questionable opinions, as it turns out down the road. What do you think, Joel? Is that accurate? Is it the high thinkers that are the engineers creating this stuff also maybe being a little off the wall?
I think part of it's that there's a little bit of eccentricity, right? I think part of it too is these are really powerful people. Like, tech companies control so much of our world. And when you give people that power and the license and control over so much of how our world exists, they can think of themselves in the most positive way, I think, as sort of like caretakers of our world. I had a conversation with a friend a while ago. He's like, man, like Twitter and all these policies and how they censor things. And I'm like, yeah, but that dude who runs Twitter, that Jack guy who doesn't anymore, I know he resigned. But at that time, if you asked him, he would say, I am doing what is right and moral and ethical. In my mind. I mean, and he thinks, and he's like, I have the power to do this. And so I'm going to do what I think is right. There's a huge ethical concern on the other side about censorship. And that's a whole other argument we can get into. I think there's a kind of a shielding as you live in that tower. And I think one of the other challenges that these tech companies have is there is an expectation for transparency, but there's also an expectation for how we foster inclusivity at these companies, how we diversify these companies. And I think the challenge with those things is when you look at studies around diversity and inclusivity, which these companies champion, that does lead to greater innovation, greater creativity. It also can lead to greater conflict within a company if it's not mediated by a sense of belonging. And that's where these companies are getting it wrong. And so very publicly, people want diversity, inclusivity at their companies. And so you've got these organizations that tout that talk about that have a chief diversity officer, but they're missing this one piece, which is a relational piece. And because of that, there's conflict. And because of that, it's making it worse because I'm saying we're going to do one thing and I'm actually creating an environment that's doing something completely different. And then I'm having you sign an NDA under the guise of not taking our trade secrets to a competitor, but really, I don't want you to talk about this because it will ruin our image. And I sit up in a tower and these are my opinions and I don't see what's actually happening at the ground level. I wouldn't be surprised if like Tim Cook and some people weren't shielded from this a little bit as well. But I think I'll take the angle that part of what's happening at these big tech companies is they're missing this ingredient of fostering a sense of belonging and care and relationality that is what is the glue that holds these diverse, inclusive environments together. And they're missing the boat and they're struggling because of it.
Yeah, that's a great in-depth viewpoint. Part of me wonders that because of the type of workers that tech companies attract, that part of what they may be struggling with is kind of keeping up with such a large spectrum, right, of viewpoints, because I think that it just seems as though it's obviously a very progressive environment, and there's a chance that if you were within a tech company for like, let's say 10 years, what was your super progressive normal viewpoint is now absolutely on the other end of the spectrum as people like sprint past you with what, you know, their views are on a variety of issues. Do you think there's any truth to that, Darnell?
Yeah, I think so. I think there is a growing number of individuals who are growing up and being educated without a foundation in ethics, in ethical thinking and ethical leadership. And I think it shows when it comes to this, right? I know in the documentary, The Social Dilemma, they spoke to a lot of these people who were responsible for the things like the Infinite Scroll, and they just had no conception of what it was that they were doing and how that would affect the human person. So I think when they're not leading with that as, you know, as the base functioning of how is this going to affect my fellow brothers and sisters, right? How is this going to affect the people around me? What is this going to do to our society? And they don't lead with those questions, it's easy to miss the mark and then to get ourselves into these situations. I mean, if Apple was leading with, you know, ethical leadership and with the idea of the human person, a lot of these things would have been nipped in the bud, like right at the beginning, but that is not the case. And I do think this idea of progress is sprinting forward, right? Things are happening so fast with technology. To slow down and have these conversations that need to be nuanced and they need to be taken with time and with care. I mean, it slows down a project by how much time? Like, you know, they're moving at lightning speed. To slow down for that would cost them, I'm sure, millions upon billions of dollars, and they don't want to lose that money, and it's coming at the expense of the people working for them.
Yeah, part of me wonders if there is an element to companies like this sort of hedging their bets, so to speak, where they just kind of err on the side of what they think maybe not what is correct right now, but what, you know, the future, you know, might bring. And so it seems as though perhaps they err on that side of like, well, this is where the momentum's going, so we should carry it through this direction and, you know, keep as many people as possible, which is generally how we run Little Flower Media. I mean, all three employees that we have, right, Marco? So it's all about gaining momentum.
Right. I mean, my biggest thing is they do not care. They don't care about diversity. They only want it to be their sort of diversity. Like, if you look at these companies, like we can talk about diversity, and that's great, right? And it is, Joel's 100% correct. Companies that are actually diverse, racially, ideologically, gender-wise, like they do last longer, right? It is a proven business fact that publicly traded companies that have more women on the board last longer. They do better over the long term because the women are less aggressive. That tempers down the men, tell them to calm the heck down, right? And it actually works really, really well. It's a push and a pull, right? That we see in society throughout history, and it's awesome, right? But Apple doesn't care, right? if you look at specifically, great example of this, you know, the bull, right, at Wall Street, right? The raging bull in front of Wall Street, right? They put what was a really cool statue, right? Like, if you didn't know any of the backstory, the little girl facing down the bull, right? Because they're talking about gender diversity, right? Well, in 2019, the last publicly traded company that didn't have a woman on the board had put the woman on the board, right? And then they said, and then the organization that created the exchange traded the ETF, right? She funded that statue, right? This wasn't an art piece that's like a protest art piece that somebody just put in there. They wanted you to see that and then go buy their ETF. Right? They do not care. Like, they are progressive because it is convenient, right? They act like they care about these issues. They act like they care about Black lives. They act like they care about gender issues, right? Until it actually affects their bottom line. And the minute it affects their bottom line, they will abandon it and they will run, just like Jack Dorsey did, right? Jack Dorsey now wants to reset the internet with his weird beard and his nose ring. Good for him, right? But, like, here's the thing, and this is social dilemma. Darnell had a great point, right? If it's free, right, you are the product. There are two industries, right, that call its clients users: the drug industry and social media. I think that's all we need to know.
That's great. Yeah, that's a lot of good points. And if nothing else, this conversation has led me to think that I would look great with a nose ring. I mean, that's the bottom line.
I'm surprised Marco didn't get 30 points when he said Apple doesn't care about you.
Oh, my button broke.
For sure, McClure, you were going to just stack them up.
No, my button broke. And not to totally beat this down, but here's another little piece of the puzzle, okay? Do you remember the ads where it was Mac versus PC? Yeah. And Mac, they got like Justin Long, the coolest of nerds, to play like the super laid back, chill Mac version. And then they got the nerdiest guy they could find with a weird thin mustache and, you know, dressed like Milton from Office Space to be the PC guy. Like, that right there couldn't be more like, hey, we're going to set a standard. And instead of caring about, you know, any of this stuff, I'm not saying that it's different than most advertising, but it's definitely one of those things that's like, hey, you've got 6.9% of the market share. Can you calm down at least a little bit? I'm tired of seeing bumper stickers. All right, moving along. I could go on for hours. This is a fun one because Darnell threw it out, and I actually had to do some serious thinking about it because on the surface value, I think reality TV is hot trash. And when somebody asks me what my favorite reality TV show, I would always say the same thing, which is Cops, because it's the only reality television show that I think is actually reality. Because it at least follows like a group of people that are doing their real jobs, and everybody has to sign a release, which is kind of weird that any criminal would ever sign a release so that they could be on the show, but apparently it's worth some kind of clout or street cred. But with that said, I really feel like the scripting and the editing is so shaped in a way that is designed to breed conflict, and that is the point of almost all reality television, that I don't know that I would consider it to be at all redeemable, despite the fact that this is going to cause a fight with my wife. What do you think, Joel? Change my mind.
I feel like everybody's going to say no. And so for that reason, I want to say maybe. Here's the thing about reality TV as it stands in its current iteration. It is exploitive, and it does something actually terrible, I think, to us and to the people you see on the screen, because it is. There's selective editing. They have a plot line that they are going for. So a writer is sitting down. Have you ever noticed on reality TV shows in the credits, there's writers listed? Why do we need writers for reality TV shows? Because they would like to determine how they want Marco, how they want Bobby, how they want Darnell, how they want Joel to look in this episode so they can tell the story. And if one doesn't emerge in the course of things, they'll manufacture one with music, with selective cuts, with taking things out of context. And that's all going to create the story they want, because at the end of the day, they want people to watch the show and they want that to be entertaining. It's entertainment. Can it be redeemable? I think so. And here's why. I think there is a wholesome way to take reality TV and use it to tell uplifting, good stories, or to bring insight into challenging places. Like, what is our notion of reality TV supposed to be? Well, it's supposed to be unscripted. It's supposed to be sort of an inside look at things. And I think there's topics and people that we could do reality TV with that could tell good stories that are emotional and moving and honest, and could give people looks into areas that they would never get a look into. And people would still be enthralled by it. People would still watch it. People would still enjoy it, but it could be something that actually makes them better, more along the lines of like a real life documentary. And I think documentaries in a way are kind of a form of reality TV, but that focuses on personalities that we can follow and actually enjoy and get into. So do I think it's redeemable? Yes, but I think it's going to take a lot of work and actually people funding it like a VC kind of thing so that they don't have to take money from advertisers. I think advertising's where it gets a little goofy.
Yeah, that's probably pretty accurate. It's actually interesting in what you said in that regard, because there are elements in which you can bring light to that, and I think that even that, unfortunately, has become exploitive. And I'll never forget watching some episode of something with my brother. I want to say America's Got Talent or something like one of those, stage performance shows. And my brother had figured out the formula in season whatever. And he goes, "Oh, this is the fourth contestant." And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "They're going to have a disabled brother or sibling, or there's going to be something going on in that family where we're going to start to really care about them." And I was like, "You're out of your mind." And no joke, that kid walked on stage and was like, "I'm here for my sister because she grew up without any arms." And it was a really, and it was just like one of those things where I was like, yeah, this seems exploitive now at this point, now that you've cracked the code. And so even that feels like somehow, even me being invested in that person is somehow being used. So, that was a long version of me saying I still think it's dangerous, and I agree with Joel. What do you think, Darnell?
So I tend to agree with Joel too. I think it's kind of like a 50-50, right? I do think there's those opportunities where it could be really good, where it showcases the human condition and showcases what people are really looking for: desires for connection, desires to be loved, desires to to have relationships that are meaningful and strengthening and nourishing. And the funny thing is, oftentimes those ones are the absolute worst ones, because they take it in, a hypersexualized manner, right? Or they take it into the realms where romance is not authentic or true love. But I do agree with there's opportunities to tell uplifting stories. At St. Thomas, we actually have a student, Kechi Okuchi, who was one of the finalists for America's Got Talent. And she survived a plane crash in Nigeria. She was one of 2 people on the plane who survived. And her story, I know, animated a community around her. And it completely changed her life, what her trajectory, what she wanted to do, the way she was able to reach out to those around her. And I think that's the positive right there. Granted, that's a single instance that I know of, but I'm sure for a lot of people, it does empower them to do good things for the people around them, to animate people who might have had similar pasts or similar struggles. And it gives them the platform that they need to offer that hope. So I think that's where the value is. I do think that a lot of it is garbage, though.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And even you saying that out loud makes me feel differently, because you know a person in real life that you have a relationship with who has that story, and yet somehow the medium of it going through the process of reality television weakens it, by the time it, where somehow you feel manipulated. And I'm sure that's an incredible story. And yet when it gets to the tail end of the product, you start to go like, oh, that's really interesting, and I wonder if I should feel the way that I feel about it. Yeah. What do you think,
it makes
Marco?
It very cloying at the end of it, right?
Yes, it can, at least, it can in certain circumstances, but I could just be overly cynical as well. What do you think, Marco?
I agree with Joel on this one a lot. I really do think that there are redeemable aspects. The problem I have is when we're talking about game shows, right, or vocal shows, right? When you're portraying a product as not rigged, right? Or you're portraying like anybody can come, give us your tired, huddled masses and come sing for us, right? And do your little dance, monkeys. That you could get it, right? That you could have that chance to become the next American Idol. There's somebody that I'm very close with that made it very far in a foreign country. I'm trying to say this as vaguely as possible.
Good luck.
In a vocal contest in another country, but specifically was not moved on right? Not because of her talent or anything, but because she didn't have a sad story. Lucky for her, right? That she was born into a family with a mom and a dad and siblings and everything, stable. Both parents had jobs, etc. Like the no sob story here. I have an issue with that because like you can't say this is a real contest and then disqualify somebody because they don't have the story that makes people cry at the end. Now, if this is just real, if this is the WWE, all for it because you know it's scripted, right? You know going in, you know going in that the writers have picked X person to win, right? And that's the fun part about it, right? But just don't tell me something is a completely equal playing field, right? And there's equality of opportunity, not equity of opportunity, but quality of opportunity. Then if it's an equal playing field, fine. If it's not, I don't like it.
You know, Marco brings up a good point, and that point is that Randy Macho Man Savage absolutely could have won America's Got Talent, hands down, several seasons in a row. Chat is bringing up a great point that perhaps cooking shows are a little bit more wholesome in that regard, maybe because seems to be like there's less on the line and, you know, it's harder to create drama, and so it does seem to be more about the celebration of something rather than, tearing something down. Although Gordon Ramsay has made an entire career on, you know, telling people that what they've prepared is absolute trash across the board. So it could go either way. Bobby, what do you think about this one? Redeemable reality TV?
You know, Darnell almost won me over, almost. And I do think there are stories that resonate. As long as you go into it with an awareness of, for some of those game shows especially, there's an artificial diversity that they have created so that there is someone of every single subgroup they desire represented. Matt, can you or someone else do a quick search on what year The Truman Show came out, the film with Jim Carrey?
Sure. Let's pull it. You got it?
Because
98.
So 98. So 1998. And, you know, sometime in the 90s too, MTV, I think the Real World, like the first Real World came out, but Survivor was the first true reality show. But in 1998, The Truman Show came out, and Jim Carrey from birth is watched by cameras, and people watch this guy, his real life, so he thinks, is for a show. And you watch the commentaries with the actors and the actresses on The Truman Show, they thought it was the most ridiculous premise in the world. Like, who would volunteer to have their lives on camera constantly? Like, that just seems so absurd. And now people sign up for our lives to be on camera. We have these devices that we put ourselves on quote reality TV all the time. So it's an interesting phenomena. I think one of the big negatives, especially with the dating stuff, is people think that this is what a relationship looks like. Like, a normal relationship must be dysfunctional. We must be throwing plates at each other and screaming and walking off set, and then the credits roll. And that's what a healthy relationship looks like. And so sometimes, you know, working with young people, sometimes there's this unhealthy expectation of dysfunction when it's like, no, that's not good. Like, that's not normal. And the reality TV stuff, it feeds into the voyeurism. It feeds into, I want to watch someone else's dysfunction. So that's problematic. But I think out of that comes a desire for reality. Well, I want something that is real. So I think out of that, we also have the resurgence in documentaries, in beautiful documentaries. Mm-hmm. You know, where Netflix and all these other streaming services, but Netflix predominantly, they've invested so much in documentaries, from stuff from the BBC to like the octopus, like mentor, like my octopus teacher, whatever that one was. Mm-hmm. Chef's Table. I am not a foodie. I just want food in my mouth to get on to the next thing I have to do. But Chef's Table, like the beauty of those documentaries and interviewing these chefs who are at the top of their craft, why they make food the certain way they do, we're hungry for reality. And so there's the cotton candy type reality TV, which is just easily digestible and we forget about it, you know, an hour later. But the hunger for reality has also led to some beautiful films and documentaries out there today. So I think some of the fruit is good, even if we just have to be aware a lot of it is trash.
Guys, I picked my take because I thought you'd disagree with it. And now that I've listened to all of you, reality TV is garbage. All of it should be canceled. Even the documentaries, it's all trash and exploitative and junk. And we should get rid of it. We should trash it, cancel it. Hashtag cancel reality TV.
Why is he getting points for
Hashtag
that?
even the kids cooking shows.
I just like it. I just like it when Joel panders to the audience because he realizes that he might lose a fake competition.
Reality TV.
Because what we're doing right now is reality TV.
Cancel it.
Oh. I'm breaking the fourth wall, but that's kind of the whole point. Ultimately, I think it was interesting. Thanks, Trombone. I do think it's weird without John, but we're still having a good time. Ultimately, I do think that it's fascinating that like the world of reality TV somehow in its like by scripting it, it feels voyeuristic, right? Versus the voluntary element, like what Bobby was talking about with like a documentary, like recently there was a Val Kilmer documentary that came out, which I thought was incredible because not only was it him, talking about his life, but it seemed like a very accurate portrayal of, right or wrong, just kind of the type of person that he was. And they just kind of let the cameras roll and he was that guy. Right. And so I think that's fascinating to see from an interest level to kind of get to peek behind the curtain. But I think reality television teaches people that they are owed a peek behind the curtain. And it just seems like it's a little bit more dangerous somehow in that regard. I'm also really having trouble kind of articulating what bothers me so much about it. It's like it. I don't know. There's something about the experience of going through it that like I just feel like something's off, and yet I feel like I'm taking crazy pills when I talk to people that love it, who are just like, it's not that big a deal. It's just whatever. And I was like, I feel like it's harming our souls, but I can't really explain why. And it's just where I come down on the issue, I guess. But that's just my own personal harshness to get through. Well, thus endeth our show for this evening. This was a super fun one, you guys. Bobby Angel comes out on top, really coming through at the end with his takes on reality television, lining up with my own, pandering to the host, which is always the way to go when I'm the one doling out the points. Bobby now gets 30 seconds to talk about anything that he wants in his life, in the world, give a shout out or shameless self-promotion. That's what I would do if I were you. And my rules are unflinchingly rigid. The timer starts now.
God in Gaming on YouTube is a Word on Fire initiative that we have undertaken to look at video games and the culture through the lens of Catholicism. And I invite everyone to go to YouTube, watch God in Gaming. We've got 6 episodes currently. We hope to do more. But 6 episodes with varying guests, including Jonathan Blevins, are all live on YouTube to be viewed. It's me and Father Blake Britton, who's a priest friend of mine. He was on the first episode of Around the Halo. And I cede the rest of my time.
That was perfect, actually. You came in right at 30 seconds. That was pretty solid. So a couple of things for everybody in chat. We certainly appreciate you. The 5 more gifted subs from Anonymous was pretty incredible, and we got a little hype train going there in the middle, which is super cool of everybody involved. It's also important that when Jonathan goes back and watches this, if he's not watching it right now, he recognizes that he is not 0-4 when it comes to the world of Around the Halo, just because he wasn't here this week and he's going to lose next week for sure.
The game.
Yeah, right. It's he doesn't need to keep track of his stats that way, but he's way behind.
He's going for.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a chance that he and the Lions are going to have something in common at the end of this season. And I only say that because I would still say it even if he was here, and it's just a joke, and it wasn't that harsh.
At least Matthew Stafford won.
At least, and Stafford won, and he's the greatest. And yes, John, you were right about the Rams from the beginning. Congratulations on your Super Bowl pick. Gentlemen, it was a blast having you. Thank you so much for joining us in Around the Halo. We are back next week with another Pardon the Intercession, and that will be Joel and John again, and, of course, myself. So we appreciate you. And let's see. Do you guys have anything else you want to wrap up with? Marco, can you think of anything that I'm forgetting?
No.
How about this, Marco? We love you.
God loves you more.
Let's change the world. Thanks, everybody. Peace.